Hey, welcome to the Investor Podcast. I'm Dan Deppin, and today I'm joined by Martin Krimmel. So, Martin, how's it going?
Good, good. How are you? Yeah, super excited to be on here. Excited to chat about all things real estate, house hacking, mindset, anything we can kind of come up with.
Yeah, I'm interested to talk to you because you're somebody that does a lot with real estate while also handling a demanding W-2 as well. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about like the kind of investing that you do and what you've been focused on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So as far as the W-2, I work at Amazon. I've been there 11 years now, so quite a long time. And work in the kind of music field. So it's a passion of mine. My two passions are music, real estate, or three maybe, and kind of personal development, really.
Hmm.
Um, those are the probably overarching themes of my life. And from the real estate side, it was probably about 7 years ago now, um, where I actually was talking to somebody on my music team at the time who wasn't into investing at all or anything, but he told me that he owned property and it had been doing well for him. So that was kind of my initial kickstart, where I was like, oh wow, if he can do it, I think I can do it. Um, and
Hmm.
I started buying my first primary here. Um, in Kent, Washington, so about 45 minutes south of Seattle. And from there, I kind of got the bug, and I was like, all right, this seems to work. I started to attend meetups. We have a big one here. Kind of, if you know Tarl Yarber,
No.
um, he's a big flipper here. He now does a lot of stuff for Bigger Pockets.
Okay.
Um, and he would organize these weekly meetups, and then did this big Pacific Northwest real estate expo. I went to it and just trying to immerse myself into other real estate investors and people that are around it, not having much background, right? Just going out there and trying to get around people that knew more than I did. Um,
Hmm.
and from there, I started out of state investing, kind of from a duplex to a fourplex. And the reason I started out of state was because it was a lot cheaper than here in Seattle, right? Seattle, Washington is
Right.
quite expensive.
We have a
Uh,
similar thing here in Colorado. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's like that price point barrier, right? But you know uh, what I do nowadays really is mostly focused kind of on house hacking in local in Seattle, Washington, and also I have my real estate license, so I've been helping people for about almost 3 years. In October, it'll be 3 years, helping people
Mhm.
buy, sell real estate here. And I do still have a partnership out of state with my very first like mentor in
Uh-huh.
the real estate space. But yeah, that's kind of my focus. Started with out of state due to the lower cost, and now I've really over the last couple of years focused more on Seattle, even though it's a high cost market.
Yeah, and I guess when you were getting started, like, how did you connect with that mentor, and like how did that work?
Yeah. Yeah, so what I did is I just randomly one day came across Bigger Pockets. I think
Hmm.
I was like browsing podcasts and it popped up, and I listened to the episode where David Green was not a host yet at the time. He was a guest,
Uh-huh.
and he was a guest talking about long distance real estate investing. And so I was like, oh, this Bigger Pockets thing sounds interesting. And then I went online and I started to check it out, and I saw the different forums, and I literally just wrote, you know, I'm new to this. I'm looking to get started in real estate investing. I have one primary home. Is there anyone that can kind of guide me or chat with me on it? And this was in my original uh, hometown, so to speak, of Buffalo, New York. I was living in Seattle, but I knew Buffalo was a lot cheaper, so I
Hmm.
put it in one of those forums, and he reached out, and we started connecting from there.
Oh, very cool. So what states have you invested in doing out of state?
Yeah, I have only well, I've technically, I guess, had property in three different places. One, Germany, which is where I was born.
Okay.
and lived until I was a teenager. So at 16, I moved over to the US and New York, which was like the place that I moved to from Berlin. I moved to Buffalo, New York. So I invested in there and then here in Seattle, Washington. And one of the reasons for that is, again, I've listened to someone on Bigger Pockets one time saying that they've never lost money on a deal, and one of their key points was they've only invested in areas that they knew. So usually places that they've
Yeah.
lived. So I kind of taken that with me, and so those three areas, that's where I was in.
Wow, super cool. So out of curiosity, like what part of Germany were you from?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Berlin, so the capital.
Oh,
Um,
okay, cool. When I had a few years of my career when I worked for Oracle, I used to get to Germany quite a bit. And there's like a direct Denver to Frankfurt flight that I got
yeah.
really, but I was mostly going to Munich, but I did get to Berlin once or twice. So that was super cool.
Oh, awesome. Yeah,
So
it's a great city, you know. Like, I personally, I will say I love the U.S. I love Seattle, so this is definitely home. But there's so much history over there that it's an amazing place.
yeah, it's always fun when you go to like a beer hall or something that's been open for like 1,000 years. We just don't have that anywhere.
Exactly, right? It's like to tie it back to like the real estate, it's like people here are like, oh, this house is from 1910, 1920, that's so old, you know, and there you have buildings in the 1600s, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Constructed a little different though, I guess. A little more built to last,
definitely,
maybe.
definitely, yeah. It's very little wood. Like here, the majority of construction is wood, right? And
Hmm.
there it's very little actually. Right? It's a lot of concrete and brick and stone. So
Yeah, it's not going in. Stone isn't going anywhere
right,
anytime soon. So
yeah, it lasts.
cool. So tell me about like how you got into house hacking and how those work, and maybe you could talk about like one of those deals because it's something that I've read about a little, like I've heard about. I've never actually done it myself, so I'm kind of curious to learn like how that works.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I always tell people, I wish I would have learned about house hacking back then. So back in 2017, 18, I would have understood because I probably wouldn't have gone out of state, to be honest. I get this question a lot, both in the group that I run as well as with clients that I work with that they kind of want to say like they ask me which state should I invest in, and they want to go out of state a lot of times for the same reason that I went out of state because it's costly here in Seattle. But what I love about house hacking and why I preach that strategy so much is because it really takes that barrier of high cost away. So at a high level, it's basically utilizing your primary residence to rent part of it out in some sort of way. And there's many different strategies that you can apply. The probably most common one that people think of is, you buy a duplex and you live in one side and you rent out the other, right?
Mhm.
But there's so many more ways you can be creative. So over I'm currently living in my third house hack here that I just remodeled. It's been a 7-month project.
Uh,
Um, so it was quite exciting. It's sort of a live-in flip, so to speak. But you have so many different options. I mean, I've done the room rental where I just rent out rooms. This one is a duplex where I rent out the top. I've rented out parking spaces. I've rented out storage, all like under the kind of house hack. So I'm always just kind of looking how can I utilize this property that I live in to
oh, so,
generate income.
so you're talking about like rents, like renting out a garage as like a self-storage unit,
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah, exactly. Garage or a bedroom, really anything. There's this really cool app called Neighbor, and I've I've kind of started with them when I bought my very first house hack, back 3 years ago now, 3, 4 years ago. And I saw that I bought a property on a 13,000 square foot lot, and the property itself was 3,000 square foot. And so I had all this land, and a lot of people think of, okay, here in Seattle, the kind of dadu play is really big now, where you buy a big enough lot and you build a dadu, a detached accessory dwelling unit in the back.
Okay.
Um, and that's a great play for sure, but it takes time and it takes money. So you can kind of like think about what else can you do. So actually through um, my manager at the time in Amazon, although he wasn't using it, he knew a friend who was like, hey, he's renting out storage. Check out this app, and I checked it out, and I ended up creating parking spaces. Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, on my lot, and it's amazing. It's the most passive. They always say like passive income, but really, real estate is more managed income.
Right. It's never entirely passive, or maybe
Yeah,
like I've shifted work where I had to do upfront work and then, but yeah, there's always like work involved
right,
somewhere. Yeah.
exactly. And so the parking is the most passive I have found to date, because it's really, you set up a spot, you say this is where you park your vehicle, they park their vehicle, it all goes through the app. You get a monthly, monthly deposit in your account for the spot, and you really don't do much more than that. So it's quite
Mhm.
passive, and a good way to think a little bit outside the box. So the point being, there's a lot of different strategies when it comes to house hacking, and that's like one of the many that I use.
That's pretty cool. I'm curious in the Seattle area now, like if you wanted to build that detached unit you were talking about, like what's the permitting process and construction costs? Like I ask because I know somebody in Denver who was looking at doing something similar, but the permitting process in Denver is pretty lengthy right now, and the construction costs were high to where it was getting challenging.
Yeah, yeah. It all kind of depends on what kind of lot you buy, what are the setbacks that you have on that lot with the
Hmm.
existing structure. So in Seattle, the minimum lot requirement to build a dadu is 3,200 square feet.
Hmm.
And what you want to look for is ideally um, a flat lot in the back. So because once you have trees there,
Hmm.
um, it becomes a lot more time consuming, a lot more costly, and the permitting issues increase, because you have to. Um, a lot of times you either, depending on the size of the tree, you either can't cut it down, or if you cut it down, you have to replant um, a
Oh.
new equivalent tree. So but if you get a big enough lot with the setbacks in order, then you can actually, you can build up to 1,000 square foot dadu, and they have some prefab plans. So they have plans where you can actually just go to the city, that it's all already there, and it can be I mean, you can pretty much start construction within a couple months oftentimes, and
Hmm.
take about like I've seen projects about 6 to 12 months for a dadu to be fully built. So from the time that you start to finish,
Hmm.
um, 6 to 12 months, about and the cost is about 250 to 300,000
Uh-huh.
to do that. So yeah, a lot of kind of different factors involved in terms of what type of lot. And of course, if you're in a kind of ecological critical area, or there's certain issues with the soil, it becomes more complicated. But if you purchase a flat lot, let's say it's a 5,000, 6,000 square foot lot, and you don't have trees there, you have the proper setbacks, you can do one of those prefab plans, and it can be pretty fast.
Oh, that's pretty cool. It's not too bad. Yeah, I think the person I know that was looking at in Denver, it was going to take like over a year to get the permitting and like three or 400,000 to build a relatively small structure. I don't know what the square footage was going to be.
Yeah, yeah.
You
You,
know.
you want to also kind of like the ceiling height. A lot of times, I've seen some, like 8 foot ceilings. 8 to 10 foot is great. But there's some sometimes you walk in them and they're quite small, and so
Yeah.
um, you want to pay attention to that. But we have a couple guys here that focus exclusively on the Dadu builds,
Hmm.
and it's a play here in Seattle that everyone is looking for now, and the reason being because they actually sell also for quite a lot. So a lot of times, depending on the neighborhood that you here, I've seen Dadus sell for 700,000, 800,000. I mean,
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's yeah, it's quite unreal. So that's why that's like the it's the hot shiny um ticket item here.
That's crazy, especially if the house is like prefabbed, right? So it's not,
Yeah,
that's wild. Yeah, that's even more expensive than Colorado. So we've got some catching up to do,
yeah.
thankfully. But so maybe talk a little bit about like, so how do you juggle like doing these house hacks and these other projects, like in the midst of your day job and just everything else going on in life?
Yeah. Yeah, I get the question a lot when I run events. So with my team here, I run both the real estate at Amazon group,
Hmm.
together with a couple other Amazonians that are super passionate about real estate and investing. And then my team here at Compass, we do monthly happy hours, and I would say every single time I get at least one or two people, that kind of want to know a bit what's the secret, what's the ways to do it, any like advice and things like that. And I thought about this a lot, and uh, there's probably a couple of themes I would say that emerge. One thing I tell people is like we all have 24 hours, right?
Hmm.
Like it doesn't matter if you're Jeff Bezos or if you're just starting. Um, you have 24 hours, right? Nobody has more time. So um, the way that I always approach it is trying to think of how can I kind of maximize the time that I do have. Um, and it's like whenever you say yes to one thing, you have to say no to another thing, you
Right.
know?
Hmm.
And so I think it's really, really important for people that want to do both, or that want to get into investing while still having their W-2, is they need to realize that like you can't do your your normal life and also do the other thing that you want to do, right? You're gonna have something's gonna have to give. So you have to figure out, okay, what am I willing to say no to, right? What are the
Hmm.
things I'm willing to say no to? Um, and uh, like people want to, for example, get their license a lot. I get that question all the time, and then I tell people like you'll have to be, especially in the beginning, willing to give up a lot of evenings, willing to give up a lot of weekends. So like you can definitely do it. It's just a matter of like what do you want to prioritize in your life. And so yeah, what I do a lot too is so figuring out every time what do I want to say yes to, what do I want to say no to. Um, the second piece is really around um navigation. You know, you're gonna have to figure out what is it in your life that you can kind of delegate both in, and this is both in your W-2 as well as in your personal life.
Hmm.
So it's like um let's take on your personal side, maybe you spend a lot of your Sunday cleaning, right? You're doing
Yeah.
laundry, you're going grocery shopping, you're doing things like that. So it's like that's going to take you, some people, let's say there's 2 to 4 hours. So maybe it's if you're in the position to do it, maybe that's something you can hire out, right? Maybe you go hire, get a cleaner, get someone to help you there. Maybe you figure out, okay, can I do Amazon Fresh or something, right? Like how can I kind of
Yeah.
utilize my time a bit better and gain that extra hour, 2 hours? When you add that up week over week, all of a sudden, hey, I have an extra 8 hours, right? I have an extra day
Yeah.
in,
And some people struggle with that. Like,
yeah,
like they go, oh, well, if I pay someone to clean the house, like I can do it. That's costing me money. And maybe they don't think about, well, But yeah, if I pay them so much money to clean the house, I can do this other stuff with those hours that, number one, I'm a lot more interested in doing, and I can ultimately make more money
Right.
doing
Right. And
that.
it's
Yeah.
exactly. And that is a big mindset switch. And I will say, like, I've gotten a lot better at it, but there's still things sometimes where I'm like, I shouldn't be doing that. Like when you think of your value per hour, right? You have to
Mhm.
kind of like put a dollar amount to that. So if you say like, hey, my time is worth, at least $100 an hour, like I know if I'm gonna, do if I delegate this and I can focus on, let's say, sending out mailers, right? Maybe you're like, I'm going to create these mailers, I'm going to send them out because it's going to get me this property ultimately that when you put it on per hour basis made me $1,000 an hour, right? Then if you
Yeah.
think of it that way, you might be like, I'm fine paying the cleaner $100, right? And sometimes it's good to go back to doing the things. I'll give you an example with that. I run an Airbnb here, and sometimes the guest goes in and leaves, and it looks pretty spotless, right? Like it
Yeah.
nearly nothing has been done. So I think, okay, I can easily clean this. I can just take the sheets, I can throw them in. It'll be very fast. But then every time I do it, I'm like, wow, this is still taking me more time that I want to spend, and I'm much better off actually paying somebody because it gives me the time back, right? And the other
Mhm.
piece of it too, which I think people underestimate, is you're actually helping someone else out. You know, you're paying
Right.
somebody else um, to help you. So it goes both ways. You're saving time, but you're also supporting their business, right? By doing that. So I try to remind myself of that as much as I can, and it won't always work. Like I will I will say sometimes there's things where I just have to do it. So it's
Yeah. I've had that too. That's one thing I've been working at getting better on, because I hire contractors for a number of things
Mhm.
in my business. And yeah, I had a couple earlier this year that just didn't work out great. So I kind of had to go back and reassess, like, okay, how I go about this. I need to do a better job when I hire this stuff out.
Right.
So
Yeah, exactly. And that can be the thing too. I have stories like that as well. Like when I first started my Airbnb for B&B, for example, I was really in that zone of like things out, right? And so I got a manager, and Airbnb management is quite costly, unlike property management for long term, which is usually around 8 to 10% here of
mhm.
your gross rents. But Airbnb, most of them like start at 25% and up.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, of your of your monthly income. And so I thought to myself, well, this is high, but I'm just starting it. Let me see how it goes. And it worked well for 6 months until it didn't. Until
Hmm.
there were gaps in communication. There were guests that checked in and the place wasn't clean. And you'll have to make a decision, and you'll have to sometimes adjust and go from there, right? And sometimes it also forces you then to be a bit more self-sufficient. So what it forced me was like, okay, this didn't work with this person, but how can I automate some of my messaging? How can I streamline some of my cleaning scheduling and all that? So
Hmm.
yeah, but
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier you were big into that, personal development and that kind of stuff. Any book recommendations or resource recommendations for us?
yeah, totally. So as far as podcasts and things like that, I'm a big fan of a podcast called The Mindset Mentor. Um,
Okay.
by Rob Dial. That's been really, really. It's a short. He does short, almost daily sessions where he talks about different mindset strategies, personal development. There's also a group that I'm part of, which is like Mindset Mentor University, where it goes a little bit deeper. Um,
Hmm.
I find those really, really interesting because you see that people all struggle very much with very similar things. Like it's, we're not all like we're all different and unique, but with kind of the reasons why, for example, we don't get started are very often very similar. Like I tell people, like a lot of it is fear-based. You know, people are like,
Hmm.
they're not doing XYZ because there's fear. Another reason that you common theme that you see is people, it doesn't match with their identity. You know, sometimes they're like, yeah, I really want to do this. Like I have friends who really want to become a real estate agent, but they really don't like talking to people.
Yeah.
It's-
Exactly.
they're just it causes them so much anxiety that maybe that isn't the right profession, you
Yeah.
know. And so it's figuring out like I love figuring out like why do people not take action, why do others do take action. And I really think there's you can figure out always clues. Like there's this saying, right, like success leaves clues,
Hmm.
which you can really look at people that have done something that you want to do and imitate it. But I think that's a really good podcast. A book that I'm currently reading is The Mind Body Connection, by Ellen Langer. She's a Harvard researcher. She's been doing for decades. She's been doing research on how the way we think affects the health of our body, and
Interesting.
she backs it up with a lot of scientific um, evidence, and I love that. And there's so many amazing studies that she kind of brings in. Um, you know, there's cases of like people that thought even just the thought of exercising and they felt like they exercised a lot, had oftentimes the same benefits as those that did exercise a lot. Or somebody, they did studies on sleep, where one group slept 8 hours, the other group slept 6 hours, but they were told that they slept 8 hours, right? So
Yeah.
their perception was that they had 8 hours, and they looked at their kind of their neurological function. They looked at different performance tests, and it was amazing to see how really the perception of how we think about things actually affects the physical health of our body. And that's something I'm super
I,
passionate and curious about.
I had something similar to that a while back. Like, well, I guess it's been maybe a couple of years now, but I started using a Whoop strap, to track your sleep and stuff.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of days early on, I started using it where I woke up, I felt good, but it told me I had like a red recovery and it was bad. And then I felt bad. I'm like, well, I wish I wouldn't have known that because I felt fine before I saw that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's funny because I did actually the same thing. We had my friend and I, we used to always track on the Amazon Halo, which was like
Okay.
their version of Whoop, and then they stopped using it, so I switched over to the Whoop, and the exact same thing happened to me, where I was like, wow, it was telling me that I slept badly, but I actually felt good initially, but it made me feel like worse.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got to use those things with caution. So,
You do,
well,
yeah, yeah.
cool. Well, Martin, thanks so much for joining. Any other things I didn't ask you that you wanted me to, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I would just, encourage everyone that kind of listens to this. One thing I would say is that really, no matter kind of the position, in my opinion, that you're in at the moment, um, that it really is possible to get started. And it's just kind of what I tell people a lot is like, figure out your why. Figure out like the reason. Sometimes people want to get into real estate just because they're like, this sounds like a good idea, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like starting a business, right? Like you want to start a business, and people sometimes just do that because they really hate their job or something. But that's often not enough. Like you should kind of figure out, what's this thing I really like? What's this thing I'm really passionate about? Like for me, I've always been passionate about finances, personal development, merging these two kind of, and I'm really excited to kind of share these stories. And it drives me, but there will be ups and downs, right? Like in everything, just like in life, like some days you'll be like, wow, I'm really crushing it, I'm doing really, really well, I'm on top of the world. And then the next day something happened and you're struggling, right? And I think those are the moments where you really kind of got to go back to your like, hey, why am I doing this in the first place? What is that thing that's driving me here? And what I often do, maybe one more tip for people that want to try this, I keep a success list. So we're naturally wired to often go to the negative. It's really easy to go to, like, you might have had an amazing day, but someone said something to you that you didn't like,
Yeah.
and then you think about that. And what I do is I keep this success list. That's a running list. I've done it for a couple of years, and I look at it every day.
Very
So
cool.
every morning I wake up, I look at it. Every night before I go to sleep, I look at it, because that way I use my kind of conscious brain to, like, influence the subconscious and be like, you're doing well. Like, you actually look at all the things you've been doing. And that's maybe a little kind of mindset strategy tip that people can utilize.
Ah, perfect. Well, Martin, thanks again for joining us. Really, really happy to have you on. It was a great episode. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Dan. Thanks so
All
much.
right.